This Superman portrait is really a send-up of the original Fleischer cartoon intro, where you saw a quick explanation of the destruction of Krypton, the rocket ship coming to Earth, and the pose of Superman with fists on hips, where he's kind of looking down a little bit. This is an exaggeration of that, where I'm getting my traditional kind of Alex Ross low angle looking up the body kind of shot, which again I'll credit to Neil Adams as an influence. This is really just connecting with the most fundamental kind of influence in my life from that cartoon shaping the way that I illustrate Superman. It also connects in ways I'd never even thought about when I was doing the piece with one of the most famous images that Steve Rude did in World's Finest of Superman, where he kind of recreated that Fleischer moment with his painted figure of Superman, and then I would spend the rest of my career pretty much doing what he did before me.
Ed Brubaker, welcome back to Word Balloon. It's great to see you. And man, Destroy All Monsters comes out next week. You were kind enough to give me the advanced look.
Oh, it comes out tomorrow.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wednesday?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, it was delayed. It was supposed to be last week, and now it's tomorrow.
Okay.
There was some problem shipping it to Diamond, apparently. Apparently, there's some problems in the supply chain around the world.
Yeah, so I know. So I heard. My God. Yeah. Ed, good Lord. We'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
Because I do want to know if you know how it's impacting anything you've got in the pipeline and stuff that, is on a slow boat, or in a container somewhere with nobody to unpack it.
Luckily, nothing so far, but yeah,
Okay.
we're thinking a year ahead now on things because of this. So
Totally.
I mean, we ordered our paper for these books like so far ahead because we knew how many we were going to be printing, and the people at Image in charge of the printing and distribution stuff are really on top of it. And but yeah, I mean, you've seen the news, like there's so many like omnibuses from Marvel and DC that are just sitting on boats from China. Like I talked to someone at Marvel and they were just saying they have like millions of dollars in books just waiting to be offloaded, just stuck in the ocean on a ship. COVID,
Yeah, what are you going to do? Absolutely, man. Well, and again, this is
why God it's a hoax, because if it was a real virus, then it would be even worse, right?
Oh, I hear. Well, and truly, Ed, I really appreciate how much you've come on since the start of COVID, because honestly, you're one of the guys that I point to in terms of everything that you've done outside of the usual channels, whether it's working with Marcos Martin at Panel Syndicate, what you're doing with Reckless, and also just the conscious choice to move now to original graphic novels. Yeah, man, I really think you juked at absolutely the right time. And again, I credit your timing.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because, we're in like a horrible pandemic and millions of people have died and hundreds of thousands of people are sick still. And yet I know a bunch of different people who, if not for having this thing happen where we're all locked down, like they've made career changes. They've made decisions that they would have been afraid to make because we're on the treadmill. And it sort of stopped, you see articles about it all over the place about people quitting low paying jobs and stuff. But I know creative industry people who are like, you know what, I always wanted to work in animation and now I'm stuck at home. I'm going to learn how to do that. And, and yeah, I mean, for us, like deciding not to do single issue comics and going straight to graphic novels, like, we'll probably do the odd single issue thing here or there in the future, depending. But I think Sean and I are both really just kind of in love with this format and feel like it revitalized everything about what we do. And it definitely, for me as a writer now, like I'm working on the beginnings of another project for another artist. I don't want to reveal it yet because it's still, but it's someone I've worked with before who's a really big deal and I'm excited about, and trying to get far enough ahead on the script for it, so that when he's actually available in like January or February, he'll have most of it there. And I'm just writing it as a graphic novel now. Like, we may break it into single issues, but and I'll have to go in and sort of figure out how to make that work. But like right now, I'm just thinking of it as one long story, because like it's more fun that way. And I mean, I love breaking things into chapters. Like in the Reckless books, there's a ton of chapters, but yeah, I love not having to think about what's the cover for issue 3, or all this stuff like months ahead of time because of solicits, and trying to find like some kind of artificial cliffhanger moment constantly. And they're not always artificial, but on some level, it's like when you do a story that's like a 5 or 12 part thing, you have to come up with like 11 different endings, or 5 different endings or something, instead of just one. Whereas in a graphic novel, even broken down into chapters, chapters can just end with someone getting bad news over a phone call, or like walking to their car and being like, all right, I'm going to go check that out. So
Yeah.
it's like a chapter is what you say it is. Like, there's a chapter in Destroy All Monsters that's just a flashback to the last case he took. It's
Right.
like, oh, here's this case I took that's kind of a nothing case.
Which was hilarious, by the way. That was a fantastic case.
Oh, thanks.
Absolutely. Honestly, man, and I imagine that some of these scenarios are these things you find in the newspapers, or I mean.
No, that was one I just made it up. I don't know why. It just came to me one day. I just thought the dirty diaper caper.
Yeah, I didn't want to
say anything more to spoil it, but
exactly. I'm gonna let you say things, but yeah, exactly, Ed.
Yeah,
That's great.
That one just really cracked me up, and I was like, oh, I wonder how I can fit that in. It's just like in my notebook when I was writing down some things one day, and I just jotted that line down, and I was like, I wonder. And then I started thinking about how to integrate it into the story as I was working on it. I was like, oh, okay, we need a moment where, we learn, because he opens the book talking about having made mistakes. So it's like, well, what other mistakes did he make that year? So
absolutely,
that's where the dirty diaper caper came in.
And you sent us right back to 1988 LA, and I mean, different vibe than Chicago, but man, I tell you, growing up here and experiencing the city, there's just a lot of just things that I think happened in New York, Chicago, and LA and stuff, and just the revival theaters. I mean, the whole thing with the revival theater, I absolutely adore, and I've loved it from.
Oh yeah.
And it really gets even more explored in the current story, Destroy All Monsters, obviously.
Yeah. This one is, I mean, each one so far has been my favorite as I've been working on it. I think Reckless, when I just started Reckless, I wrote it, the first half of it, so fast because I was just so excited to be doing it and doing this new thing, and it was going to be a graphic novel and not single issues, and just the freedom of it. And then but then I thought, okay, we introduced him, like what's next? And so for the third book, as I was working on it, I was just I was so in love with like the interplay between Ethan and Anna in the first 2 books, so you didn't get very much of it. And I just was like, oh, I want the third book, even though I'd known what the case was going to be and everything. I thought I really just want the third book to be about them and their friendship and their relationship. And so that was my it's my favorite one so far. And but now I'm like, God, about 2/3 of the way done, or 3/4 of the way done with the fourth book, The Ghost in You, and that one is my favorite of all of them so far too. So they just, I don't know. I thank God I'm not like, I hate the next one. Well, I really botched it on the next one.
Like Hitchcock, after he storyboarded a movie and would have to shoot it and be like, oh God, I hate this. This sucks.
Yeah, it's never as good as the storyboards. Yeah, the great thing about doing this with Sean and Jake is like, even if I wrote a chapter where I was like, I'm not really that happy with it, like when I get the pages in, I'll be like, oh, this turned out great. What was I worried about? Like I beat myself up and agonize over. There was a lot of moments in this third book, especially. There was a couple pages where I just kept making Sean change what the dialogue was or the narration was, and then ended up going right back to what I'd written the first time. But in the end, after making him change it like 4 times, I'm like, you know what? Just go back to what we had originally. It was fine. I don't know why I was second guessing myself. I get in these like little anxiety spirals during the month before we go to print as we're waiting for all the colors to come in, because I can read it over a million times and make sure everything reads really smoothly and nothing bumps. And, you know, that's where I do like any minor changes.
Okay. Is Sean drawing hard, or is he drawing digitally? How, you know what I mean? Is it physical, or
I believe he's penciling. He does his layouts on paper, I think, and then he pencils digitally, and then he prints that out, the blue lines out onto Bristol board, and then he inks physically. So he has original art for it all, and he does the lettering. He does the balloons on the page. So when he pencils digitally, I think the first thing he does is he rules all the panel borders digitally, and then all the word balloons, and then he makes sure, you know, he does all the lettering first before he pencils in the characters and stuff. So whenever I've done any rewriting on stuff, I try to make sure it fits the same balloon, you know, so it's roughly the same amount of words, which can really drive you crazy. But I want to make sure that he doesn't have to redraw anything on you know, or change the balloon size or whatever. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, get rid of that, and then he has to redraw some background here or there because that had been previously covered with a word balloon. We're actually doing, haven't announced it yet, but I'll go ahead and announce it here. We're doing something unique that we've never done before for pulp. We're actually doing, it'll come out, I think, in the spring, maybe the summer, I'm not sure. We're printing it overseas, so it might be the summer, but we're doing a process edition of pulp. It'll be the same size as the deluxe editions, but it'll have like my notebook outline, the script, and the pencils. So you'll have like a page of script and a page of pencils, and all the way through, and then you can see the final version of it. So you compare the script and the pencils to the final version. You can see all the little things that change here or there, or all the parts where I took out a caption that I felt like we didn't need. Sometimes where I look back and I'm like, we could have left that in. But yeah, we've never done anything like that before, so I'm really excited about that, for people to see like how we actually make the book from beginning to end. And I realized like, oh, I lost my notebook for that one for some reason. I had written it in the back of another notebook or something, because it's the notebook pages for one of these books are 10 to 20 pages long of just notes. But yeah, I just thought it'd be interesting, especially since it's a book people have really just gone crazy for. It's like our paperback is in its 3rd printing now already, and we got the Eisner stamp to put on it this time.
That's great.
But yeah, it's our fastest selling book that we've ever done, and other than the first Reckless book, I think is sold about the same as that one.
Wow.
But we're going through like multiple printings on pulp now, and so I thought, okay, let's, people really into this one, let's do like a process edition. Plus Sean's art for it and the pencils is so detailed. So but yeah, that'll be, I think we're advanced soliciting that like later this year for whenever it comes out, either like late spring or early summer. I can't remember, to be honest with you. But yeah, that's going to be exciting. That'll be like about a 400-page long book.
Wow, that's terrific. No, man, that's and seriously, man, that's great, because I know anecdotally, just the various emails I get when we do a talk and others, and you're one of those guys that people I think are really the generations under you. Forgive me, not just, but they're watching you, man. Yeah, but they are, honestly, man. They really are watching how you guys do it, and I think that's terrific that you guys are making these process books. Wonderful, man.
Yeah, I've made friends with a lot of these. I would say younger, like some of the like up and coming. I say up and coming, but the guys that like are the most popular guys in comics now, just like they replaced me and Bendis and whoever. Mark, like the next generation that came and is like selling way more comics than we are. Yeah, I talked to a bunch of them though, and it's just always so flattering to hear. It just makes me remember, like, you know, going up to like Marv Wolfman or whoever, Len Wein at these conventions when I was first starting to get published. But yeah, it's interesting. I meet a lot of these guys now, and or gals, and to hear how much that they've been following me and Sean's books all this time. And a lot of them, even though I think they're, you know, technically more successful than we ever have been, sort of look at what we're doing with how we move from project to project, and our books are always these very kind of, you know, art objects. And, you know, I think a lot of people really kind of like that model, and kind of want to follow in that model a little bit, which, you know, for us, it's always just been like, we're just sharks swimming forward, and we just want to keep experimenting and keep moving. And neither of us, you know, ever want a long enough vacation, I think. Basically, we just like doing it. And, you know, for the first 10 years, it was always like, well, maybe the next one will be the one that's the big hit. And now it's like, it's just kind of built into this thing where our audience has just grown and slowly grown. And, you know, when we did those criminal deluxe editions, the re-releases of those, and the first two had been out of print for almost a decade. And in a month, I think we sold through almost the entire print run of the reprints of volume 1 and 2, and whatever was left on volume 3, which had, you know, like, people weren't buying volume 3 because they couldn't get 1 and 2. And so yeah, it was like the interest in all of that stuff in our backlist. Like, I wasn't paying attention, and then I got like an email from the guys at Image about the Fade Out. And apparently the Fade Out has just been selling like crazy, which you know, it came out 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not something that we did a lot of press around when the book came out, but the single edition trade paperback is one of our best selling books. It's constantly like going out of print. Like, every year we have to send it back to print, and we're doing pretty big print runs on it. So it's like, it's sort of become like that, and Pulp and the Reckless books are like our stealth bestsellers. But, you know, but those criminal deluxes just like flew off the shelves. Like, people were really into those. So I was not expecting that. I thought we printed enough to last like another 5 years or something. So I don't know what we're gonna do, because they're very expensive to print.
I understand. Yeah.
And you never know. It's like, did everybody who want one get one finally, or do we wait a few more years and let more interest build up? Like, it's a hard thing to do, because, you know, printing has gotten a little, paper's getting more expensive. Storage fees are more expensive than they used to be. We didn't used to have to worry about that so much, but, you know.
Yeah, well, I wonder, and I don't know if you have the ability with things like BookScan or anything like that, but it really seems like, going even back to your Wildstorm days with stuff like Sleeper, that weren't really, I mean, there was a little bit of a superhero thing, of course, but you know what I'm saying. And you've just nudged more and more into non-costume stories with criminal, Reckless, everything else.
Yeah, I think of our stuff as being much more for like a general reader. Like, the book you could give to anybody. Like, if you're, I mean, to me, it's someone, I think we talked about this before, their dad comics.
Yeah.
Like, you can give your dad or your father-in-law like Reckless, if he's like a Jack Reacher fan, and he looks down on you for being 40 and reading comics. It's like, well, here, read this. You know, like,
absolutely. But not only for dads, but truly, I think that the more general reading audience.
Yeah.
And I really do think in these 20 years, they're hip to the idea with Road to Perdition, and other things, like A History of Violence. And it's like, no, wait a minute. This is a dramatic platform, a dramatic medium.
Well, from volume 1 to volume 3, on the advance order part, at least, are like, we've sold probably about half of the print run through comic stores, a little bit more than half through comic stores, and a little bit less than half through bookstores. But the advance orders for the third volume the numbers through the bookstore market were twice what they were for the advance orders on the first one. You know, maybe they're just ordering how many they know they can sell, so they don't keep selling out and having to reorder them through Diamond or whatever. I mean, and probably 80% of the book market is just Amazon at this point. But
That's true.
but yeah, I was shocked when I saw the numbers. I was like, oh wow, we're actually like pretty much 50-50, like bookstores and comic stores now. I mean, we couldn't exist without the comic stores. That's where our real you know, base is, I think, to large degree, because you know, so much of the book market is online, and comic stores, like I just saw someone just forwarded me a tweet from a shop that was putting up their display for tomorrow, and they made it's what is the name of this? It's like Dr. Cowell or something. Let me look him up.
Sure.
It was pretty funny.
That's great, man.
It's Cape and Cowl Comics. I think they're in Oakland.
Okay.
Cape and Cowl Comics, and they order so many. They order the book like it's the new #1 or something. They order like hundreds of copies of this thing. They made a big domino thing. So they had the camera on one, and then someone put their finger in and pushed it, and it just went, and it went across the whole store until it got to the guy sitting there next to a huge stack of them reading a copy of it. And I was like, holy shit, like that was the dream. Because, you know, having been in comics since the 90s, I remember when Vertigo was experimenting with graphic novels, and what they were finding was shops were just not advance ordering enough copies to make it financially viable.
Yep.
Like they would eventually order enough, but they were like, hey, this is a $20 book as opposed to a $2 or $3 comic. So they would order like 3 copies and assume that they were, instead of the 20 or 25 that they could have sold, because they want to, you know, they don't want to put all their money out up front. And, you know, I think this is the big thing that Sean and I have cracked with that market, is we've sort of proved to retailers over the last 20 years that our audience wants whatever we're doing. And, you know, you're going to lose those sales to online retailers if you don't have the book in stock the week it comes out. And also it's cool to have, like, you know, a huge display of like a new cool hardback book from us. And yeah, but I think, you know, I mean, I could be wrong, but it feels to me like this is really the first instance where a huge percentage of the direct market has really embraced an original graphic novel series in a way that, you know, like this was always my dream, was like, I wish they would order these books the same as they ordered the comics. And I was like, wow, now they are. Yeah. And yeah, it's been kind of amazing and a little bit overwhelming, but also like, I just love that we're able to do it. You know, I mean, this is the 3rd book in 10 months, which is insane. We can't keep that schedule up, obviously. We're just doing 2 next year, but
okay, that's fine.
But we're almost done with the first one, so who knows? Maybe we'll fit in something else.
I certainly hope so, man. And again, I love your experimentation with, you know, the magazines that you've done with Criminal and things like that. But I would say for Destroy All Monsters, I'm going to hand it to a friend who kind of grew up. I guess I mean, it's a woman, but she grew up in that same era. But I think she will really relate to Anna in this story. And also, I mean, she's just a big fan of good, like, drama and good fiction. And that's the thing, man. Like you were saying about handing it to your father, but I think you can hand it to younger non-comic readers who like crime stories or whatever, and they're going to be very entertained because it's beautiful. And it's, you know, again, you've got that foundation of the story that you wrote.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of crime writers and that I've met over the last like 15 or so years, since we started Criminal, basically. And I was like advertising Criminal in the back of the hard case crime books. And I would go to like book fairs and stuff and do signings at like the crime bookstore place instead of the comic store, because I was like, I want to hit this audience. And so I've met a lot of crime writers over the years that I've become friends with. And so I always think about them when I'm writing my books too. I'm always like excited. I'm like, oh, Megan Abbott likes my books, or Sarah Gran likes my books, or, you know, Jason Starr is a fan. You know,
Jason's great. Yes.
I think about that, and I'm like, I always want to write something, you know, that if I was someone completely outside of comics who just liked crime novels or pulp novels or something, and someone gave me one of our books, I would find just as much in that as I would get in a you know, a prose novel.
Yeah.
And I, you know, I try to keep it fast and loose and experiment around with the comics and stuff, but I definitely think of what we're doing as sort of aimed at that literary model. You know, unfortunately, it's, you know, I would need twice as many pages, I think, to accomplish as much as people do in a novel. I still, you know, I'm amazed at how Darwin was able to compact a 300-page book into a 150-page story, because I still, like, I wish every time we finish one of these, I'm like, I wish I could have fit like 10 more things in.
You and Sean are it has the Parker story that you guys did, has that come out yet, or is that still
No,
waiting for that?
I think that's coming out in the spring, maybe, from I don't remember when they've announced that. I know they're printing it in Korea or something. The book is done. I've seen and worked on like the edits with Dunbier, and there's like a roundtable interview about Darwin with me and Dunbier and Bruce Timm. That was a lot of fun, and a lot of creative editing to take out.
Is that still coming out, or is that?
Yeah, no, that's all in there. Yeah, no, it's.
Oh, I see. So it's written. I was gonna.
Yeah, no, it's a big. No, it's a.
Yeah.
I mean, because there was a roundtable interview in the first Martini edition that was me and Darwin and Scott Dunbier and Tom Spurgeon.
Yes.
So now only me and Dunbier are left standing. So we roped in Bruce Timm to be the one to tell us all the Darwin and Hollywood stories.
That's great.
He was really happy to do. So yeah, I think it's funny. This is like the longest time since finishing something until it actually coming out in our entire career. Usually we're finishing a book and it goes to print like a month later. It's been really odd for me because I also think it's one of the best things we ever did. I sent a copy of it to Lawrence Block, actually.
Wow.
Because I'm on his newsletter, and I just thought, you know, I know that Abby Westlake was really, you know, moved by it and
wonderful
and liked it. I mean, I think I'm the first person to ever get permission to write a Parker story, that's because Darwin was adapting the pre-existing books. And, you know, she was very clear early on, if we were going to write an original thing, everyone had to understand it was an original story, but I had to write the whole script before she would approve us doing it even. So I wrote the whole thing just on spec, and my initial pitch for it, she shot down, and I'm glad she did, because she was right. I was doing something that was like a little too, you know, I don't know, something that even Westlake wouldn't have done. And so I altered a couple things and brought it back to her, and she approved that, and then she liked the script. But when she saw it all drawn, she was really moved by it and thought it was really great. And for me, it was like a lesson in realizing how much Donald Westlake's writing has influenced mine without ever really consciously trying to. I think partly because he wrote so concisely. And for comics, you have to keep your sentences short, you know? So, but yeah, it was just interesting to sort of try to ape his voice a little bit and realize like, oh, it's not actually that different than the one I usually use. I think I showed it to a couple of different friends who are huge Westlake fans, and they said it's more emotional than anything he would have written in a Parker story. But it's a Grofield story. You know, the Grofield stories are different. Plus, that was like taking a huge weight off. I don't think I could have written, like, straight out of the gate, I don't think I could write a Parker story, because you just feel so much pressure. Whereas, you know, other than one book, the was Lemons Never Lie or something like that, the other Grofield books I don't think are very popular, because they're sort of like a weird take on James Bond. Like, he's always going to like some foreign country and helping them in a rebellion. It's like he's not just pulling off a heist or getting in a revenge story or something. And then there's that one that Hardcase put out that's pretty much like a Parker book but starring Grofield, and that's the one everyone loves. That's the one I love. And so yeah, that was really like can I write a Grofield story instead? Like, that'll be much less pressure. But yeah, I sent it to Lawrence Block, because I figured, well, Lawrence Block is never going to get this, book from IDW. He's never going to see this story if I don't send it to him. And I thought, 90% chance he'll just delete the email unread too. But yeah, he wrote back and said something really nice along the lines of he thought Donald Westlake would be really pleased with it, and that just blew me away.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Just and I showed it to like Charles Arday from Hard Case Crime, who was really tight with Westlake, and he loved it, and so I think it's one of the best things we've ever done. And I think because I was doing a tribute to my friend and one of my favorite writers, and just really and Sean, I think, knowing he was going to be in a book that's this big surrounded by Darwin Cook's art, and there's 100, maybe 200 pages of unpublished Darwin Cook art in this thing. It's it's amazing, all this stuff all these studies he'd done for Parker, a bunch of unpublished illustrations that he'd done for some of the books that they were going to print, and that were uncolored, but we've got like the pencil drawings and stuff, and it's just an amazing thing. I think that those 2 Martini editions really will stand the test of time as some of the best comics ever.
Agreed. My first volume is waiting for the second one, and that's why I always ask about it.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to read the other Grofield.
I think you can order it on Amazon now, finally.
Oh, that's good to know.
It's actually scheduled. But yeah, they print. I mean, I think those books cost, God, I don't even know how much they might even cost as much as like 15 or 20 a unit to print.
I believe
they are the biggest books I've ever seen.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was buying every separate graphic novel as they were coming out, and now I've basically just given them all to my nephew, who's loved what Darwin did with those adaptations as well.
Yeah,
because I got the Martini edition and everything. I kept one because Darwin signed it to me, and I was very happy that I managed to. I never got Darwin on Word Balloon. It bummed me out. We'd talk a lot at conventions.
Oh wow,
he was amazing. The iFanboy guys. The iFanboy guys got him and really became good friends with him. I was just on the acquaintance level, but he was always really nice to me. And do you know if Mrs. Westlake is going to license the properties the way that like Parker's estate did with the Spencer books, and we've had Ace Atkins and others?
I don't believe so. I don't know. This is the first time anyone's ever gotten permission. I think his son is involved, so you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought about it for a second. I was like, I wonder if I should approach them about like trying to write some of these things, but I suspect it's so much harder to write a prose novel than to write comics and TV and film.
Yeah, where are you on possibly ever writing a novelette? I mean, is it still in your head that you might do it?
Honestly, I have. I suffer from some pretty bad like TMJ related issues. So I try to limit my time in front of the computer, and part of my problem is I like clench and grind my teeth at night. I wear all these different night guards. I've had to have all this dental work done and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, I try to limit the amount of time I'm actually writing, because when I get really into the groove when I'm writing, I apparently really clench my jaw on the bad side. So when I'm having a really bad flare up, it's really hard to get a lot of work done. And I think, wow, if you were writing a novel, you have to get up and, put like 4 hours into it every day, just straight through. And you get so lost in it. Like the times when I've gotten like 100 pages into it, like, potential novel, it takes over your life. And I think, if I can figure out, how to fix the problem where like half the days I feel like my head is lopsided or something. It's I've been dealing with it for 15 years now, and I've had times where it's been better and times where it's been worse and times where I barely even notice it's there. But the pandemic has really not done me any favors on that. I've broken several crowns and had to have dental work done, and it's just Yeah, I saw some study that apparently like it's a huge percentage of people who've had to go in and get crowns replaced during the pandemic because we're just all bottling up all this anxiety about the world. And, you know, I mean, the world's on fire at the same time that we're having this pandemic. And, you know, I read too much. I've been trying to force myself to read less news in general. And, you know, and just because it's, you know, I mean, there's a reason that all the reckless books talk about, you know, the environment as much as they do in the future.
Absolutely. You know, also, you're right. And I mean, we're all dealing with the fact that the world's on fire, but I want to point out that your newsletter, your most recent one, you had a great article, and I haven't really had a chance to really read it yet, about because you not only will pepper what you're doing, and this is basically a commercial for you for the newsletter, but you know, you always point to people to like cool articles and other great stuff, everything we would get in the back of Criminal, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, the back matter and stuff of what to watch, what to read, or whatever. And this thing about this 60s starlet that
Oh yeah,
had the weird
true crime cold case. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Because honestly, I was kind of snooping around. I don't know if you know this columnist from Chicago, Irv Kupsonen. He was like,
No.
when there was Earl, I forget their names now, but you know, you had Winchell and those guys on the East Coast, and you had the West Coast kind of society guys, and hey, Jimmy Stewart was seen at the Brown Derby tonight, blah blah blah. Irv Kupsonen, our Chicago guy, he would do that for the Chicago nightlife.
Oh wow.
And his daughter was a starlet in the early 60s. She's in the Jerry Lewis movie, The Ladies' Man, and actually has some dialogue. Beautiful girl, and she was murdered under bizarre circumstances.
Oh,
and
wow.
so I'm always fascinated. I mean, I'm not always looking for the murder stories.
Yeah.
Just that string of pinup beauties that managed to make, you know, movies and TV, like Joy Lansing. I'm sure you know Joy Lansing and stuff, and you know, people like that, or Pamela Tiffin. You know, was it Harper?
I mean, I say love. I'm always fascinated by the, you know, like unsolved murders of, you know, of it's interesting when it's someone who was famous that fell on hard times kind of, and it's unsolved, like Sal Mineo. They still don't really know what happened.
Yep.
You know, there's always those cases that you used to be back in the 80s and 90s, there'd be magazines or zines that would, you know, there was this zine called Murder Can Be Fun. And that's I kind of make a loose reference to that in Destroy All Monsters. Actually, that was the zine I was thinking of for
one of Anna's friends or whatever.
Yeah, for Anna's boyfriend.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the name of the actual zine because it's in the next book. Let me see if I can find it.
Sure. While you're looking.
While we're here.
Yeah, no, while you're looking, man. In Chicago, for everyone listening, Quimby's is a great bookstore that sells comics.
I used to go to Quimby's.
Yeah, it's fantastic place for zines. So yeah.
Yeah, the zine that he worked on, I called The Forbidden Zone. But I put the cover of one of them in the next book because it's about Hollywood murder mansions.
Great.
Or Hollywood murder houses. There's so many. There's a couple famous like Hollywood murder houses in LA where you know, there's just bizarre stories behind them and rumors that they're haunted and things like that. So that's some of what the next book is about.
That's excellent, man. No, I'm glad to hear it. Again, you really do immerse us, all three of you, Sean and Jacob, obviously as well, with their work. No, man, right there. It's a time travel when I read these things in the best way. And you do. And then, like you said, even just the casual mention of zines, I'm like, oh, that's great. And just also, again, the theater plays a big part in this story. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And it's great because, again, it's another thing that's disappearing are the revival places. I mean, there weren't that many outside of big cities anyway.
Yeah.
And I know they're on tough times. I always follow. There's a great one around Illinois State, down, you know, central Illinois, kind of surrounded by farm country and stuff. The Normal Theater, and that's a great one. And those guys are tight with Scotty Young and you know, the people that run that. So yeah,
I grew up going to those. Like my dad, we would always have the calendar for, in San Diego, it was the Ken Cinema that was the one that was, it was when I was a kid, I think it was bought by Landmark,
okay.
who were doing all of those. But like every time I'd move from one city to another, there'd always be one or two theaters like that. In San Francisco, you'd have like three different ones. Like you had the Roxy and the Castro, and I can't remember what the other one was. Oh, the Red Vic, which was like they had couches actually that you sat on.
Oh, that's
And then they
great.
eventually moved the couches out and put seats in. They found rats had been living in the couches.
Yeah,
So it was
exactly.
on Haight Street. But yeah, that was a cool old theater to go see just weird movies at. And but yeah, that used to just be a thing. And I remember as a kid, when I was in high school, one of my friends was a projectionist at one of those theaters, and that was like a whole thing. One of my first major girlfriends worked at the Guild Theater in San Diego, like up in Hillcrest, and they were like one of those like just show art films for a week and constantly. I think the longest film that was ever there was Sex, Lies, and Videotape, because it just kept selling out every night. But yeah, I just remember like hanging out at those theaters a ton and thinking what a fun job that would be to be the person who like actually scheduled like the cool double features every time. I'm thinking about that now, because in the next book there's some of that, and I'm trying to think of like what would Anna schedule with Django or something.
Have you
Original Django?
Absolutely. Yes, of course, exactly. Franco Nero, not
Yeah.
Christoph Waltz and Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
Do you still have Turner Classic Movies, or have you cut the cord?
Oh no, well, I've subscribed to all the different streaming apps. So Turner Classics is on
HBO
Max, I think. And I have the Criterion Channel app,
Awesome.
which has been fantastic lately. I like that they curate stuff and take stuff off occasionally, because part of me is like, wait, why is that not here? It was here a couple months ago, and then I was kind of like, oh, because they want you to watch it when it's there. They don't want you to just go, oh, this is here forever, I'm going to bookmark it and never come back. I remember in the old days when Netflix sent out like DVDs, and there was some study about the aspiration of what you put on your list and what you actually always moved to the front was like the garbage that you actually felt like watching. You'd have people with these like lists of all these like sort of art films that really they didn't ever want to watch, or they aspired to want to watch, but really they wanted to watch Fast and Furious.
Well, I was
now that's what people do with their queue anyway. They put all this stuff in it, and then they're like, oh, Squid Game came out today. Everybody just wants whatever's the new thing. You never hear about people like watching the thing from 3 years ago that they just discovered. You always hear about like whatever's this month. And
you're right about that. Yes.
To the point where like I often am like, when a new season of a show drops on Netflix, especially because they still do all in one day, I will be like, wait, did I watch this? And then I'm like, oh, it appears I watched it. When I look at the thing, I'm like, oh, well, it says I watched all 10 episodes of the first season. And then I start watching the recap thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this. But it's like 2 years ago in one day or 2 days or something of my life, and then I forget that it exists because things go in one eye and out the other at this point. I think Amazon and Apple and Hulu have been real smart about dropping like 2 or 3 episodes to hook you and then go weekly after that. I'm now annoyed though when something just drops a single episode, like for a pilot or something. I'm like, wait, you're just going to give me 1 episode of this? And what if I like it? I can't immediately watch 2 more? Like, what's wrong with you? Are you punishing me?
No, I'm with you, man. And in fact, Only Murders in the Building has just been amazing.
And I haven't. That they didn't give us 3 out of the gate.
Yes. And it's funny, I haven't watched yet today. I know the last.
Oh, you haven't watched the finale yet?
Yeah, not yet.
Oh, okay.
But good Lord, I love it. And I
half guessed it.
Oh, good. That's
I was half right. But yeah, it's
I mean,
that was one we got completely obsessed with. I know I was texting with Fraction a lot about it because he was really obsessed with it. I had never really paid attention to Selena Gomez before because I'm a man in his 50s. I didn't grow up watching her on the Disney Channel or whatever, or dating Justin Bieber. I don't think I've ever seen her do anything other than Spring Breakers and this. And I don't remember her being the standout in Spring Breakers. I remember it being like weird that she was in it, was sort of the news, and it made people go see the movie.
Yep.
But in this, I'm amazed. She's holding her own with Martin Short and Steve Martin. I love her voice that sounds like it's from someone 20 years older than her, and just like with a really bad stuffed up nose. Like she's got she's like Demi Moore with like a huge nasal twang, like nasal kind of California. She sounds like she's from California or Southern California to me. But yeah, I just love the sort of way that they put that whole show together. I was very jealous of when I watched the pilot, and I was like, oh shit, why didn't I think of this? Like this is fucking brilliant. And here you have two of my favorite actors of all time who are, you know, up to the point where basically that's the only way for them to star in things, is to basically put the whole thing together around them in a way where, you know, they can sort of, I mean, Martin Short is the funniest person in the whole show. Like every little tossed off half insult is like just kills me. But the mystery on that is very tight. I gotta say, the episode 7, I think, that was all from the POV of the deaf kid, that's gonna win like every award next year. But the mystery itself, like I rewatched the whole thing twice before the finale. Like over the last couple of weeks, we were rewatching, and then we would watch the new one. But like my wife actually made a chart of all the suspects and what floor they lived on, and it was really, she was obsessed with like trying to figure out who the killer was. And yeah, it was really fun because it was like a fun show that was also like a really dark murder mystery inside of it. So it's like part comfort food and part compulsion. 100%. And in the same way that like any kind of true crime thing is, you know, like real true crime, like that first season of Serial, when everybody in the world first discovered that true crime was a thing, except for those of us who'd been watching like Dateline NBC for 30 years. I remember just like suddenly everybody wanted to talk about true crime stuff, and I was like, where were you when I was reading Anne Rule books, and you know, when I was 19 and everybody thought I was a weirdo.
Yep.
You know, like
100%.
when I lived in Seattle and I like read all the Ted Bundy books, and then went like, I'm going to start like a walking tour of all the houses where he murdered people. Like, no, that wouldn't have been a good idea. But I remember being in a house in Seattle in like 1993 or 1994. I was at a party at a house, and I realized it was a house where Ted Bundy had killed somebody, or had taken someone. It was one of his first victims, and they had like a downstairs bedroom that was like that went down the hill to where this one bedroom was. And I remember being in this house, and I was looking around, and I'm like, this looks like one of the Bundy houses. And then I was like, hey, is there a downstairs bedroom where you like go down and there's a door, and it has a door that leads out into the downstairs backyard? And then they were like, yeah. And it was this girl whose house I was at, who was throwing this party, and I said, I think Ted Bundy killed someone here. And they were not thrilled to know that.
Well, who was
they turns out not really the kind of thing people want to know.
It's not a selling point for the
it's like I watched Halloween Kills the other night, and there's those people who live in Michael Myers' old house, and I was like, there is no amount of money that you could pay. Even two gay men would not try to gentrify Michael Myers' house in real life. I mean, if anybody was going to, you know,
That's awesome.
but that was just like, holy shit, these guys are living in Michael Myers' house on purpose. like it wasn't just enough time passed that the realtor didn't have to say anything anymore.
You know what I love about Only Murders is how they make fun of podcasting too. And my God, I mean, everything. And literally, still to this day, my favorite moment is when one of the episodes ends with Tina Fey. And she's like, but first, let me tell you about Squarespace. And I lost my mind. I'm like, that's fantastic. I mean, and that is so greatly, for podcasters. It's like, MeUndies and MailChimp and all these like little things that they sell on podcasts.
Well, I love the like certain people are great at commercials, like which is just funny because it always reminds me of WKRP in Cincinnati when Les Nessman had to record like a commercial, or Dr. Johnny Fever had to like do his own commercials and he hated it, and so he'd sort of make fun of whatever the thing was. But I'm friends with Paul Scheer, and I love like on How Did This Get Made, I always end up listening to the commercials because it's like he's telling you a little story about the thing, and I get the sense, I haven't asked him about it, but I get the sense he doesn't actually do commercials where he talks about shit that he doesn't actually like he uses the Mirror, like, and so the Mirror advertised on their show that he got a free one, he's obsessed with it, he uses it, like, and I asked him like a month or so ago, I said, I have this new book coming out. How much would it cost to advertise on How Did This Get Made? And he said, way too much. We'll just have you on the show to be a guest and talk about it.
Wonderful. on both ends. I'm so glad to hear that for Paul, and also obviously that he's like, no, come on.
Yeah, I think Earwolf, handles all that stuff, and I think they sell big bundles. So like that's why it is Squarespace and Blue Meals or whatever, like all these things that are like these huge things where they actually have giant advertising budgets. Whereas I was just thinking, how cool would it be if Paul had to write and record a commercial about how much he likes my books?
Oh, that's awesome. I know Hardwick used to do like a bulletin board, and every now and then would throw in a mention of a graphic novel and stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, that was when when the sales for the Walking Dead paperbacks first started taking off during the first couple seasons of the show. The reason that they started, the real spark there was like Kirkman was on the behind the scenes thing, the Talking Dead, and he brought the books on and showed the books, and within a couple weeks those books were selling hundreds of thousands of copies a week. Yep. And because that show was being watched by like 25 million people or something at that point.
Yep.
And I think the Talking Dead was even being watched by like 15 million people at that point.
No, it's truly nerd culture in the last, really, since I've been doing Word Balloon 15 years, it's just been amazing to track.
Yeah.
And it's been great to be ringside to see some of that stuff. And truly, between Patreon, my people that support me monthly with Patreon, and the ads. I mean, Ed, I was let go in radio at the start of the pandemic, and Word Balloon is its own thing. And thank God I'm staying in my apartment, I'm paying my bills. And
it's amazing to think that we can, I thank God for Image Comics all the time, but like I have, that whole Substack thing happened, right? And like one of the reasons, I also was like, I can't imagine having to send 3 newsletters a week and wrangling extra comic work. I knew I had this big Hollywood thing that was about to start. So I was really flattered that Nick wanted me to do it. But I was also like, but I was also like, well, Sean and I are already kind of doing like our dream version of what our comic life would have been 20 years ago would be to be doing what we're doing right now. And we're making, better money than we were making when we worked at like Marvel and DC doing this stuff. And I just looked at it and I was like, well, it would be great to have basically free money to create comics with people. And it did end up like sending me back into like emailing like an artist that I hadn't worked with for a long time that I'd been wanting to work with again, just to inquire when I was starting to think about it. But just the idea of like having to schedule an extra thing and all of that, I just was like, I'm too exhausted by the idea of having to try to do Substack too, on top of Friday and the Reckless books and whatever else I do with Sean and the Hollywood stuff. I couldn't imagine trying to add 2 other comics on top of that. And I just thought, you know, but if it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and someone made us an offer like that, like I would have been like one of the first people to jump at it, because it would have been like, holy shit, getting paid to do exactly what I want to do. For a lot of these, you know, a lot of these guys have still been really just doing the odd personal thing, you know, like Tom King still does a lot of work for, you know, a lot of his stuff is DC owned properties, and you know, Tynan actually quit Batman to just devote himself full time to creator owned stuff. And you know, having done that without like a huge monetary off ramp, like my monetary off ramp was that I was going to use the free time to, you know, work in television and juggle that. But yeah, I had, you know, 11 years ago or whatever, when I quit working at Marvel, like if someone had said, hey, here's like, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to just create whatever the hell you want to do when you don't have to pay us back, I would have been like, what the fuck is happening here? You know, how does this work? But yes.
Yeah, man. No, you guys.
I was kind of glad to be in a position where I was like, yeah, I don't need to try to, you know, add like a ton to my workload. But I'm really curious about how those are working out. It seems like Chip seems to be the one who's putting, of the ones I've subscribed to, Chip seems to be the one who's putting out the most actual comics through it, and I'm getting a lot of process and behind the scenes stuff from people so far. And Tynan started to put out more comics more regularly, but a lot of them I feel like it was the rush to sort of try to build something. That's like I think Hickman might have only published like one part of like the prologue so far, and I'm really fascinated by what he's doing. But I want more comics, man.
I hear you, man. No, I'm the same way. I'm reading all the process stuff that Hickman is putting out. He and the artists and everything that they're doing, and it is really interesting to watch. Well, you and Sean were like, you know, carpenters building one house at a time. So, and Substack's like a big real estate developer that's like, here, build a town. You know, or
yeah, it is. It is amazing. People freaked out about it in a way that I wasn't expecting them to, because like, I don't think, like, I think I said it in my newsletter, but it's like, I don't think it's disruptive at all. Like, it's disruptive in that, like, Tynan's the only one who quit doing the other stuff to just devote himself to that. But I think he would have done that anyway, because he's got Hollywood stuff going on, and he's got all his creator-owned comics have exploded.
Yep.
You know, so he was probably on his way to that anyway. He seems like one of the sharper guys of that generation, as far as not feeling like, you know, he seems to strike while his iron is hot usually. Like he launched his own magazine when he was selling 100,000 copies of Batman, you know, like he seems really sharp about understanding his audience basically, and what they're interested in. But yeah, you know, seeing retailers freak out about it or whatever, I was just like, basically these guys are just serializing graphic novels that they're then going to publish. And, you know, like, if you like the thing, it's like you will have been able to see exactly what it is as it's coming together. So you'll know whether you want to order copies for this. I mean, I'm guessing most of them will, you know, I think some of them have gotten over 10,000 subscribers, but I think most of them are probably going out to, you know, at most a couple thousand people. So it's not as if it's this huge readership. It's that it's the opposite, where it's like it's your core hardcorest fans who want to see how everything comes together. And those are the exact people who want to buy it in print when it comes out later. Like, that's what the funny part is. Like, whoever is subscribing to those Substacks, that's not how they're imagining the final version of the thing to be to them. Like they're gonna, whoever is following the Hickman ones is gonna buy those trades and hardbacks when they come out. I'm going to.
Don't you think the anger is coming from DC and Marvel fans who are still enjoying a James Tynion Batman and are like, hey, wait a minute, god damn it, now my story's ending. And yeah, man. And again, I understand that frustration, but again, Ed, I mean, and especially getting to know people like yourself and all the others, it's like, this is exactly the greatest thing, because it's that great evolution from the original Image guys doing their own thing back in the 90s, your generation with Greg and Brian and Matt and Gail and Kelly Sue came in at the tail end of that. And now this new generation that we're talking about, they can have their cake and eat it too, and really be more in control of their careers and how they want their careers to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general we overblow how much people are mad about things anyway, to some degree. Like if you look at any topic on Twitter, you're mostly going to see the people who are angry about it. Like I suspect not that many actual comic fans are that upset that James Tynion is quitting Batman. Like to go do his own thing, but those are the posts that you see like passed around and stuff, is like the people who are angry about it, or the fucking crazy comic gators who are like, this is happening because of blah blah blah, and it's like, yeah, whatever. And what I thought was interesting was how many of them talked about one of the reasons they wanted to do it was so that they wouldn't have to maintain Twitter presence anymore. They could just devote their social media to their newsletter, which is like, I have been doing a newsletter for like 4 years or 5 years or something. And that was like, the primary reason was like, I wanted to be able to present these things in such a way to reach the actual audience. And I had 100,000 or 89,000 Twitter followers or something like that, but I never had a single tweet be read as much as my newsletter is read, which is like 8,000 people now or something like that.
That's
and
great, man.
To see that, how many people are just like tired of the toxic wasteland of Twitter, where like, not only is it just, if you go on and you look at your mentions, I remember early on Fraction saying, just never look at your ads, like never look at what people are saying to you, just use it, put your thing up and don't care what people say. That's the only way to survive it. And he quit long before I did. But I remember like thinking, like, it's weird when, like, if you're part of that universe, like stuff can happen that you don't even know about, and then people are angry at you for not having responded about it. Or it's like, it gives people a place to come at you and demand your opinion about X, Y, or Z, when you may not know the facts, you may not care to give an opinion. Like my feeling is generally most people's opinions, I want opinions of experts on things who know about what they're talking about generally. Like the average, I am such a knee-jerk opinion person myself about certain topics that I'm like, always like, early on, I decided to stop myself from just responding to things on Twitter when I was on it, because I just was like, all right, I'm gonna take a moment here. Because you should never, like, it's like if you got an email and you were angry about like a sentence in it, and like whoever wrote that email may not have realized that sentence was going to piss you off, but you respond really angrily. Like, you always want to look at that and go, wait, does this seem professional? Does this seem, whatever? But people with Twitter, it was like, it just became this endless thing where everybody's yelling at each other, and at the same time, you say this to people who are still on Twitter and they'll point out all the good things about Twitter. And it's like, yeah, I'm friends with Ta-Nehisi Coates because we were both on Twitter and he was saying nice things about my comics and following me on Twitter. So I DM'd him and we became friends, and we've kept in touch now that neither of us is on Twitter. But honestly, like, all the reasons that people say they have to have it, I would say, are things that we're told, but that aren't actually true. Like, my sales of my books did not go down at all when I stopped using social media, and I never had Facebook. So there's all these mid-list authors who, like, their publishers won't let them quit Facebook or Twitter because they're like, oh no, you have to have a social media presence. And then I was reading an interview with a bunch of them who decided to just quit it anyway, and their sales either went up or were exactly the same, and the social media had no impact on it at all. So
Interesting.
I was thinking about that, and I thought, all right, well, it sucks that I don't have this way to immediately get, you know, a tweet out to 90,000 people or whatever. But then I just thought about it, and I'm like, yeah, but only like at most a couple thousand of them ever saw that anyway. And, you know, I can be much more in depth in a newsletter. I can talk about behind the scenes stuff. I can really sort of create something that's a more of an experience for the readers who follow our stuff. And that's been, you know, I mean, I don't do it as much as, you know, like Chip and Kieran and some of these other ones, some of my other friends do like one a week.
Yep.
And I'm just like, oh, that would kill me. I do like one a month.
Right.
If that.
No, no, and again, it's all the kind of back matter that we would love to read, you know, in the back of if you were still doing single issues. As a mid-level podcaster, I grapple with social media. Truly, buddy, I grapple with social media all the time. I know where I am on the podcast spectrum and everything. I'm not a 1%er.
Yeah, you kind of need to have a way to get word out to, you know, to everybody. No, I mean, Marcos with Panel Syndicate, Marcos like is trying to convince me to take over the Panel Syndicate Twitter for like a weekend when the Friday trade comes out, to answer questions from the fans. And he said, you've been off Twitter for so long, people might really care. And he's like, unless that would make you want to put a bullet through your head. And I'm like, let me think about it.
I understand. When is
because it is like a weird thing with like, because the times where I've gone back to look at it, like if something's happening and I'm like, okay, I'm curious what people on Twitter are saying about this.
Sure.
Which is really, you shouldn't be, because if you're curious about what people on Twitter are saying, they're mad about it. Whatever it is, they're mad about it.
You're
they're
right.
not happy. They're not having a nuanced conversation. They're mad about it. Whatever it is, whatever side they're on, they're angry. If someone's like, oh, did you see what people on Twitter are saying? I remember when the news first started reporting what people on Twitter were saying. And I thought, how many followers does that person have? Like when they're being quoted on the news, it's like some guy with 14 followers. Like,
you're 100% right, Ed. Yes.
It's like, it might as well be a man in the street interview.
Yes.
Where you're like, you have no idea. The corner could be across the street from an insane asylum. You know? Like, you just don't know. Like, it's but yeah, it really, it's a strange thing because it is a very powerful, influential thing. But I think as a force to be reckoned with for now, it seems like it's more a force to be reckoned with for stuff like social justice or complaining about things or trying to get, you know, bans on this or that. And you know, a lot of times I'm on the side of whatever the thing they're, you know, I'm also angry about such and such thing, but I'm not talking about it because I feel like, you know, I'm just a person. What's
right? It's an uninformed opinion. I get what you're saying, buddy.
And absolutely. I mean, sometimes they're informed opinions even, but it's just like, I feel like a lot of us, like you're talking about, like a lot of us in the early days, it was like people just making a bunch of jokes. But also, like, I saw the impact it would have. God, must have been like in the aughts at some point around 2007, 2008. If you released a comic and a bunch of people on comics Twitter or whatever talked about that comic that day, that book, like that amount of buzz, like just on social media, could really boost the sales of something. But now, getting a lot of buzz on social media, I don't think that has the same amount of impact. I was talking to someone else the other day. Now you want like 10 different newsletters to talk about your book as opposed to like 200 different people on Twitter to talk about it.
Interesting.
Because you just get out to more people. It's a more thoughtful like plug or whatever. Usually no one's going to talk about your book in their newsletter if they didn't actually read it and like it.
Well, I'm always appreciative when you put in word balloon when we talk and everything in your newsletter. So I hear what you're saying. Before we wrap up, because I know we're close to wrapping up, and honestly, I'm so Dude, as
We
always.
could probably go for like another 20 minutes if you
Okay.
want.
All right.
My meeting got pushed back, so.
Okay, because I don't want to mess you up, but truly, you're always great with your time, and I thank you for that. And we've packed so much great stuff already. The reason why I brought up Turner,
I feel like we haven't talked about the book almost at all.
well, again, I don't want to spoil, but it's another great chapter in Ethan's life, and you really get into. I'm happy to do this for a minute or two more and do it,
Yeah,
because I have a movie I want to see if you've seen before. But regarding Destroy All Monsters, no, man, it's really great to see Ethan and Anna's relationship explored. I love where you leave it, and I'll leave it at that for people to read. But I think that's really in kind of classic Brubaker Phillips family form of where you with that. But
that was an interesting choice to make. All of a sudden at the end of the book, like how the final pages of the book were almost a shock to me, even when I realized that was what I was going to do. Like I knew what the end was of the story and everything, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to tell it. And then when I got to that part, I just thought, shit, am I doing this? Am I actually, shit, I guess I'm doing this. This is crazy. But, I don't want to spoil what it is, but yeah, everybody who's read the book so far has been really like surprised by that ending. And it's, to me, I was just like so gratified because I thought it almost felt like out of left field in a way. But I really, I felt like that day that I was writing it, I was like, today, today is going in the book somehow.
Wow.
And it was a really, I couldn't have done that had we not been doing it graphic novel style, like I would have been planning it out so much differently, I think. But yeah, I also like that, one of the things that never happens in these sort of series books, like I've read, I think, all but a couple of the Reacher books, and I don't have a sense that Reacher ever gets older. Like, I know time passes, I know how old he was at the beginning, supposedly, but like I don't get a sense from reading these books that age affects Reacher in any way, shape, or form. I've never seen him work out in any of these books, but I really wanted to do that thing. I remember when I used to interview private eyes for research and stuff, my stepsister's husband is a criminal defense attorney, and the PIs that work for their company are really interesting. They were actually they've solved murders and stuff. Like when they were working criminal defense, they've found evidence that proved not only like that the client was innocent, but who did it and stuff. So it was really interesting. And yet neither of them ever carried a gun. Like most of their job is just sitting in a car or going and knocking on doors and asking people questions, or going to prison and interviewing people. But I really got out of it that so much of the job would just be just this sort of like any job. Like when I worked at the nachos stand at SeaWorld or something, it was like most of it wasn't interesting. And then every now and then something really crazy would happen. And I thought it'd be interesting to do a series like this and start it in the past and get up to, whenever the guy stopped taking work, when he got too old for the job anymore. And I feel like this is the first book where you really feel like his age and the punishment that his body takes because of this job and because of everything in his past. You feel it starting to hit. And the book really, as much as anything, is about aging, like in these two different, like Ethan's heading towards 40, and Anna's heading into her late 20s finally, like that, going from 26 to 27. Like people don't think about it that much. 26 is like, for me at least, it was like when I was 25, I'm like, all right, I'm still young, I'm still a kid. And then I turned 26 and I'm like, yeah, it's that last year before you have to start growing up, right? I was 25 just a minute ago. Like I'm still, really, when you think about it, 26 is like your 25th year where you're really paying attention. Because really 0 to 1, you're barely conscious.
Yeah.
And so, but when you have that, when you realize like, oh, I'm going to be 27, and then you're like, shit, I better start thinking about what I'm going to do with my life. Whereas when you're starting to be in your late 30s, you're like, that's when you start waking up with aches and pains that you're like, oh, I'm going to feel this for the rest of my life, right?
Yep.
That's when I started having like TMJ issues. It was like I woke up one day with my ear clogged, and I was like, well, why is my ear clogged? And
Wow.
and it had
Yeah.
nothing to do with my ear. And it was like, oh, my ear's clogged because I fucking sit in front of a computer all day and write, and you don't take care of myself. So it's but yeah, you start to, and old sports injuries like that you didn't feel, suddenly you're in your mid 40s and you're like, oh, why is my knee fucked up? And you're like, oh yeah, because I fucked it up in high school.
My hands are like that. I broke my hands in my 20s, and now when it rains, like all that old man shit that you hear.
Oh yeah.
It's like my hands hurt, and it's like, yeah.
I was wrestling in like 12th grade or something, and I bent one of my fingers completely sideways at the knuckle. And wet, cold weather, that knuckle always really hurts. But I never had seen like a pulp novel, PI novel thing where the character just sort of, where it skips around to the cases that are interesting, basically. Because the really popular ones just put out a book a book or two every year.
Yeah, like Spencer and Parker.
Yeah, exactly. And like I recently caught up with like a bunch of the Michael Connelly books that I was probably like 8 years behind on those. And during the pandemic, I just sort of bought up all the ones that I was like, I don't think I read this one. I don't think I read this one. And I got completely addicted to them again. Like I love the Harry Bosch books in general. But what I thought was really interesting was he's letting Bosch age. Like Bosch ages in real time because he fought in Vietnam. He was a tunnel rat as a teenager. And but still Bosch feels invulnerable to me in a lot of ways. Like he's had heart surgery, he's gone through like cancer, radiation treatment, all this stuff has happened. And yet at the same time, he's still like, I still feel he's almost invulnerable. But it's interesting to see him dealing with like the aging of his character. And Ian Rankin's been doing that too with the Rebus books.
Yeah.
And like I really want to do like an interview with the two of them about the idea of writing a series character for so long that you're allowing the character to age as you age, because then you're looking at it as like this long cycle of stories about this person and how their life changes because of what they do. But Bosch and Rebus are both cops who work homicide, and in LA there's a shit ton of homicides. I'm assuming Glasgow has enough to keep Rebus busy. It's the UK, there's far less murders in general. But like a PI, probably every 3-4 years they're going to have a case that's worth writing a book about. That was kind of what I was thinking, was like they're not all going to be like every case that you take is not going to be worth a book, or your life is far too interesting to be a realistic life in any way, shape, or form. And it's like Ethan is way over the top with the violence and how many people he murders, or the stuff he gets away with, and the cops just kind of look the other way. There's certainly a lot of like pulp cliches that I lean into with his character, but I try to treat him as if he was a real person living that life anyway. So it's like, oh no, you've been shot, you've been stabbed, you've been blown up, and you like to go surfing every day. It's going to be painful when you wake up when you're 38 or 39. Like you're going to be like, holy shit, I need to sign up for yoga and take a bunch of supplements.
Well, that's why I love Agatha Christie's Last Poirot. Curtain. I love that from that standpoint.
But she wrote like in the 40s, right? Like because she didn't know how long she would live, so she wanted to write the final one. And I think there's some anachronistic stuff in it because of that, like because it didn't get published until like the early 70s or late 60s, right?
That's right. No, it was early 70s. Absolutely, man. Yeah. Because that's when I started.
She couldn't have predicted what it would be like then.
or a movie like that. I love Art Carney and Lily Tomlin's movie, The Late Show.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Where he's like the senior citizen detective and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with you. And I think Parker did it a little bit in Spencer and had him age a little bit. Definitely time progressed and everything.
But
So
in the Richard Stark Parker novels, Parker's the same always. Like the times change, technology changes, but Parker seems like like Parker's like Archie, like, are always in high school, always the same age. Like
that's
the
awesome.
times can change around him. Jughead can get a mohawk, but Archie will always be like in high school no matter what.
Hilarious.
Between two different girls.
That's awesome. Yes, and again, Ed, I look forward to that day when you're in retirement and you're writing your Jughead comic. Come on. I'm gonna hold you to that. I don't know
if I'll ever do that. I might just try and convince Roberto to let me write a Jughead episode of Riverdale someday.
That would be amazing. Absolutely. So pending, I don't want you to spoil, pending news for TV with you?
Hopefully, yeah. I'm working on I'm like the executive producer and showrunner for a really big project for HBO Max right now.
Wow.
That is just about to start up, and I keep expecting for it to get announced. And I think because I'm like the last person to join the project, it's a weird situation. Let me check my email again and see if anybody wrote back about whether I can
talk about it or not. All
right, still can't talk about it.
No problem, buddy. It's cool. That's fine.
Still not totally clear to talk about it, but yeah, it's one of those ones where it wasn't something I was really looking for, and it just kind of came to me, and I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting, and it's with some great people who I know and respect, and it just kind of fell in my lap in a way that I was like, well, how can I say no to this? And
wow.
And yeah, it's like and I've hired like one of my best friends to be part of the writers' room, and she's fantastic and excited about it. And but yeah, it's one of those things. When people hear what it is, the comics fans community will literally just shit their pants in one collective browning of the comics internet. But yeah, it's I'm really excited about it, actually, and I'm looking forward to finally, like running one of these things or co-running one of these things with the other executive producers. But yeah, it is like one of those ones that's going to just blow people away that I even am doing it.
That's wonderful, man. No, it's so great to hear. And yeah, well, when you can talk, and maybe you'll wait until you want to talk about the fourth Reckless novel, you'll come back.
Yeah.
But and it's okay, Ed, honestly,
I'll be done with it by then, hopefully.
Oh, well, yeah, there you go too.
At least in season 1.
Well, and truly, I mean, I know how busy everybody gets and everything.
Yeah.
So, and all right, but truly, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you about this Brando movie that I became aware of because I saw the Rita Moreno documentary on Netflix, and it's Brando and Rita Moreno from 1969. I've never seen this movie. It's called The Night of the Following Day.
No, never heard of it before.
Okay. Well, I have a feeling, I mean, truly, I it's one, like you said about art films, I really do have to make time to rent it and watch it. Brando looks amazing. It's 1969. It's, before The Godfather. He's in shape. He's beautiful.
Oh, wow.
And I read an Ebert review of the movie that he did in 69. And Ebert's like, well, I guess they're trying to make Brando back in his Wild One days, and that he's a badass. It's a crime film.
Oh, wow.
And,
I'll have to look that up.
See, there you go, Ed. And this will be grist for either the newsletter or the next time we talk.
I'll have to look that up. I was trying to think of the name. Is it One-Eyed Jacks is the movie that he directed, the weird Western, and then they made the sequel to it, The Missouri Breaks.
Yep.
Where that's the Missouri Breaks, I feel like, is his last real sort of weird Brando hurrah post. Well, I guess he did Apocalypse Now after that.
Yeah, and Ebert references, and why he was disappointed in this film, he references Reflections in a Golden Eye. And it's just like, boy, isn't it a shame coming off of that? And I know it wasn't a box office success, but the critics all loved it. And Brando's just kind of doing this ordinary crime vehicle. And he made the suggestion that I remember him and Siskel doing for Eddie Murphy at one point in Murphy's career, where he's like, just make little movies. Yeah, really focus on your acting and character. You're much better than Daddy Daycare.
Instead of doing Beverly Hills Cop 3 or whatever.
Exactly.
It's funny how we always want that. I remember, like, in the 90s, I remember talking to somebody about how I couldn't watch Jack Nicholson and things anymore because he just seemed like he was doing Jack Nicholson all the time.
Yeah.
And that's like, you know, that's there's still going to be the odd thing that he does where he proves that he's one of the greatest actors. And I remember thinking, like, I love De Niro because De Niro loses himself in every role and becomes whoever the character is. Now I feel like De Niro is at the point where he is often doing himself, but he
100%.
still also proves that he can, you know, for the right director and the right project, he isn't just showing up for the paycheck.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see that because we always want that. Like, how strange is that dichotomy in with fame though, of like, if you're trying to get a movie made, you need movie stars to get it financed, right? You always think, and when you're talking to producers early on about like a movie script or something, you're always throwing around names of huge actors. But when you really want to make a movie, you kind of want just a bunch of great actors that nobody will be going, oh, who was that? What was he in? What, like, because you want someone who's just going to lose you and lose themselves into the story. And you want like your John Hawkses, where, you know, it's like he looks different in every movie and he's a completely different person than he was in the last thing. And, you know, you always want that. But to actually get these things made, you need those big stars who are gonna, you know, do very similar things. Like I was talking about a movie based on one of my books that I'm, you know, in discussions with right now. And some of the actors came up and I'm like, well, that person's a good actor, but they've been doing it for so long that would they play the part or would they sort of do whatever shtick that they do? Like if you like, I love Ryan Reynolds. I think Ryan Reynolds is really hilarious. But almost in every movie now, Ryan Reynolds is, you know, like, I don't know if he's writing his own dialogue or improvising a lot of it. Like there's always, like when he was in Hobbs and Shaw, you get the sense that they just put him and The Rock down at a table with a bunch of coffee and we're like, just say a bunch of stuff to each other. Like, and it'll be fucking hilarious. And they're some of the best parts of the movie, actually. Like, I'm not complaining about it, but it makes me wonder, like, if I were to like be trying to make a serious movie that Ryan Reynolds was being offered as the star for as a way to get the movie, like, is it going to be, you know, is he going to be like that hyperactive kind of thing? And does that fit for the role? Like, I now think about all that stuff more than I did having not worked with actors. I know probably, you know, based on the one time I had a meeting with him, that if he was going to do something like that, he would make it completely serious and throw himself into that side of it. Like, he's a, you know, he's a really sharp guy.
Cool.
Like, he was interested in one of the criminal books early on.
Oh wow.
Actually, we couldn't get it put together because the guys who I wanted to direct it didn't have any credits yet. They didn't get any credits until they directed John Wick, and now they're two of the biggest directors in Hollywood, but no one would let them make a criminal movie back in the day. That's Hollywood for you.
Well, hopefully the buzz you'll get from this HBO Max thing will open some more doors for you, bud.
We'll see. We'll see. I've always got a couple irons in that fire. The older I get, the more I'm just kind of like, I'm really glad the comics are doing well, because that's really where the joy is. The Hollywood stuff, I'm looking forward to the new one because I think it's going to be a fun experience, and I'm excited about it. But yeah, Hollywood, you know, as much as comics will break your heart sometimes, like Hollywood really, especially for writers, like wanting to do movies as a writer is almost like you might as well just stand in line for therapy. It's like, what, you know, it's like, oh, I'm a masochist apparently.
Masochist came to mind. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's like, especially if you're writing a script before there's a director attached, you might as well just be writing, you know, empty pages, because the director's going to show up and be like, let's change this, and this. And in fact, that's so much stuff. I'm just going to fire you and bring on my friend who I always have rewrite all my movies for me. Like, 100%. And I've talked to Oscar-winning writers that's happened to.
I believe it.
You know, like more than one.
Hollywood is like a pet owner with a treat and that's begging. And it's like, wait a minute. Right? I mean, yeah. Good Lord. And again, all anecdotally from talking to people like you guys and everything. And it's heartbreaking.
We all keep hanging on because there's the odd experience where, like a friend of mine worked on Better Call Saul for, she was the writing room assistant from the first season, and she's been writing on the show for all the seasons after that. And, like, there's the odd thing where just this miraculous work of art appears. Like, if not for me having seen like episode 7 of The Sopranos out of nowhere, the one where Tony takes his daughter to, it's like episode 6 or 7
college
season 1, when he takes Meadow to look at colleges. I was staying in a hotel in Savannah, Georgia at doing a talk at SCAD, and I didn't have cable at the time. I was really broke and just living with roommates in San Francisco. I didn't even have a TV, and that was just on HBO that night. And I'd heard of The Sopranos, but I watched that episode, and that changed my whole life. Like Sleeper and everything Sean and I have done, started with me realizing, like, holy shit, they let you do stories like this now, and seeing the moments where that kind of story was so powerful, but also felt so personal, and it felt like therapy in the same way that when you read like a Ross McDonald, Lou Archer novel, you feel like this is therapy for the guy who wrote it. He's writing about his own life and putting it into this mystery. And, that's so much of what writing is for me, is this kind of self-therapy. Like, that's one of the reasons Ethan Reckless, while he's, 15 years older than me, has basically my backstory. He's a Navy brat whose dad was a commander in naval intelligence, and he moved around everywhere as a kid, and he always felt like an outsider. I remember watching Diner for the first time when I was in like 10th grade, and just being so jealous of these 5 guys who'd grown up knowing each other their whole lives, because I didn't have that at all. Like, other than like cousins that I would see every couple of years or whatever.
Because you moved around all the time.
That. Yeah. We moved, and even you'd move somewhere for 2 years, and other people would move. You'd make friends with someone, and then they move away 2 months later. You learned early on as a Navy brat, and probably an Army brat or Marine brat, all of them. You learn early on that you can't rely on people being there. And I feel like it's all the ones I know that I've met later in life, they have like a kind of, they're a little bit of outsiders, and a lot of them are artistic and have like depression issues. And it's interesting because that nomad lifestyle, when you're real young, it doesn't allow you to create those sort of lifelong friendships in a way. And I'd never seen a character in a series of books. I'd never found a way through my own writing to really write about that experience until with Ethan Reckless. And it's funny because Reacher is in those books is like a military brat, but I don't get the sense that the guy who wrote him is. And that, like, when I read it, I like there's a certain like ennui that's missing.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I don't get the sense that Lee Child actually grew up moving every 6 months to 2 years.
Wow.
Because I feel like that does something to your voice and the way that you write about things. And I love the Reacher books. They're super fun. That was part of wanting to do Reckless, was like, I want to do my version of that kind of thing, that kind of Travis McGee or Reacher.
Yep.
I mean, Reacher owes so much to the Travis McGee books.
Understood. Absolutely. No, and I love
the wandering troublemaker.
Yep.
But yeah, it's interesting because I write about that as a way to sort of try to understand my own past by putting it into some other guy who had like a completely different childhood than mine. Other than these sort of tropes, like he grew up in the 50s and 60s instead of the 60s and 70s.
I love it, man. Truly. And it looks like we're hard up against your time limit. So you want to wrap?
Oh yeah, we should.
45. All right, listen, man. Destroy All Monsters out Wednesday. Another chapter in Ethan Reckless's life. And all it is more and more interesting. And truly, Ed, as always, I love where the conversation went. thank you very much. Continued success. I'm looking forward to the announcements that are coming. And you're always welcome back. So whether it's we talk in the spring when when the next novel is out, or you got time for an HBO Max talk as well, you're always welcome back.
Oh yeah, well thanks, man. Thanks a lot.
Beautiful. I'm stopping the recording.
All right.
And yeah, thanks, man. I know you got to run.